Yo, hey, it's your boys. It's Anime Parlay. We're here to talk about Luffy. We're here to talk about Luffy not being what a lot of people think to be the savior of mankind. We'll get into it. Obviously, you read the title. You're probably pissed off. Whatever. It is what it is. It's Killer Cam. I'll let the rest of the crew introduce themselves and we'll just dive right in.
What up? What up, y'all? Peace and blessings. It's your boy, Mr. Wild and Free.
What's up, y'all? It's Moogie Mike. Let's get it.
Yo, okay. We are missing our fourth member of the crew, our quartet. It's Father's Day. What are you gonna do? Anyway, so we are gonna talk about Luffy and really kind of what it means for the series as a whole, as we kind of end up in this kind of late stage shift to the prophecies of Nika, a little bit more history on Joy Boy, and how that applies to Luffy. Because here's the thing. We did a video, obviously, you probably see it on the channel. Got a lot of reaction to it. That basically was making an argument that Emu is kind of unnecessary to the series. They could be a good villain. They need a little bit more development, but they kind of feel like they just got thrown in, and it's kind of taken away from other really well developed villains, whether that's Akainu or obviously our probably YouTube channel choice of Blackbeard. We're all Team Blackbeard over here. But yeah, basically the comments that we got from that seem to believe that because Emu represented domination and control and this shadowy kind of almost Illuminati-esque government kind of force or council, and juxtaposing that with Luffy being this, Nika-like, if not Nika reborn, Joy Boy reincarnated liberator, that was the perfect dichotomy and the reason why Emu made so much sense. I completely disagree. We'll talk about it. But yeah, basically, the contention of this video is that people seem to have all of this wrong in terms of what Luffy wants. And we're going to get into it. We're going to explain exactly what we mean. But I want to kick it over to our co-hosts. What do you guys think about the idea of Luffy being this grand liberator and that the series itself is about freedom and liberation first?
Well, first is if that's the defining point of the question, then debatable, right? But in my opinion, I do think it is a valid aspect of the story, and it's worth being presented in such a light. At the same time, I do understand that there is nuance in the dynamic, and so I'm willing to expound upon that throughout this episode, but that's how I feel about it.
Moogie, let's get your
In my
thoughts.
point of view, I think there's a lot more on the side of freedom that the story to me has an underlying theme of freedom throughout everything, like the sailing, piracy, what is constantly going on. But as far as liberation goes, I'm sure we're talking about this a little bit more later. I don't think that Luffy's primary goal is liberation. Like, the idea of him being free has end results that lead to that, but that's my take.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, let's dive in. So let's expound upon it. Okay, what are we actually talking about? We're talking about the basically idea, the central, kind of core message of One Piece. Is it about freedom, right? Is everything that Luffy does is a series about, basically whether it's Luffy wanting freedom through the power that he gains as the Pirate King, right? I mean, people will probably, quote Luffy saying that the reason he wants to be the Pirate King is because it's the freest person in the world, right? I don't think anybody can argue that that has been said. However, I think what is really kind of important to point out is what is Luffy's dream? Some people will say, incorrectly, Luffy's dream is to become the Pirate King. That's not Luffy's dream. Luffy is trying to become the Pirate King to achieve his dream. What is his dream? We don't know. Luffy has said it to his crew, and it's more or less been kind of like off-screened in terms of what he actually said. And it ironically is the thing that really kind of grounded Shanks specifically in believing that Luffy was this person to basically put all his chips on, right? Because there's a moment where Shanks specifically says, when he's talking to Rayleigh, who eventually ends up as Luffy's mentor, kind of master, sensei, whatever you want to call it, that Shanks says to Rayleigh, he said the exact same words as Roger. That alone, right, is one, what made Shanks really kind of see that Luffy was this inheritor of Roger's will and someone worth betting on, right? So, I mean, first off, that kicks off the entire series. So that's one. Two, the second half of the series, when Rayleigh is, and just to be clear, Rayleigh is the person who effectively finds Luffy and the rest of the crew. It is after Luffy attacks St. Charlos in the auction house. Rayleigh is the one who basically kind of goes there and like talks to Luffy or whatever, and he's like, dude, I've been really excited to meet you. Like, I've followed you. I know, basically, obviously, the things that you've done so far to make it to this point. But more specifically, I had a conversation with Shanks, who used to be a part of my crew. And he, after coming back, and I hadn't seen him in 10 years, he lost his arm, and he's just talking about this kid. And he's talking about this kid being basically kind of like the new, kind of reincarnated, whatever you want to call it, version of like my captain. And I wanted to meet you and I wanted to talk to you. I'm a big fan. That is essential, right? Because effectively what we're talking about is Luffy's dream being, again, something that we're not really kind of aware of at this point, is separate and distinct from just being the Pirate King, right? It's really important to call that out and to make that distinction, because a lot of people think he wants to be the Pirate King because he wants to be the freest person, and because he wants to be the freest person, he wants other people to have freedom, right? That's not really the case. Luffy wants to be the Pirate King. Again, we've already mentioned he has some dream that we don't know, but supposedly it's amusing, right, to people who hear it. And the way in which he believes that he's able to accomplish that is through becoming the Pirate King. So the Pirate King is just a step in that process. And the reason why it's important to call that out is because when we're talking about steps being taken, every single decision that Luffy makes within the course of the entire series, other than, and I'll point this out to be fair, going back to try to save Ace, like going into Impel Down, going into Water 7, or I'm sorry, not Water 7, going into Marineford in order to like try to stop the execution. Every other decision that Luffy makes is following the log pose in the Grand Line to get him closer to basically the One Piece, right? Because we understand that in order to get or to claim the One Piece, it's somewhere on the Grand Line. Everybody believes it's at the end of the Grand Line. So Luffy, with his navigator Nami, are following that process, right? So you have East Blue, basically East Blue Saga. He is like accumulating his crew, necessary members to get him basically through the Grand Line. We need a chef. We have a first mate, swordsman, whatever you want to call it. We have our navigator. We have a sniper. At the time, like, Usopp was actually brought on as like a shipwright. Yeah. But all of these things, and I'm really trying to underscore this, and then I want to break for a second to get you guys' thoughts, but like, all of these things are purposeful. And the purpose is to move him closer to what? To becoming the Pirate King. What is he not doing specifically? He is not specifically going to these islands because he's heard of some kind of injustice and he's trying to liberate them. That is not what he's there for. He is there because the log pose pointed him in that direction. And once he got there, the disposition of Luffy being someone who believes in basically people having freedom. Freedom or the ability to choose what they want to do in terms of their ambition, the path that they want to follow. He wants them to have that same ability, right?
Yes.
So
exactly.
I want to break for a second and get you guys' thoughts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was going to be my primary point right there, is making that distinction, right? Like, he absolutely does liberate people. He is technically a freedom fighter by happenstance, if he were, like, I get your point there, because that distinction is the difference as to why Luffy is not trying to be the number one, on the dang revolutionaries. You know, like if he was trying to be a freedom fighter, right, he would probably be aiming to be the number one in the Revolutionary Army.
Yeah, Dragon is the
And
liberator.
you know what I'm
100%.
saying? Like
That's his goal.
Dragon's role is to be a liberator, and so I get that nuance there, where it's like Luffy pulls up to the situation, and based on his disposition and how he is as a person, he believes in freedom enough to fight for it for others. However, it's not inherently his goal to be a liberator.
Yeah. I mean, and even the idea of like power, right? Like Luffy doesn't think that everybody around him and that he liberates basically, because I don't want to get this conflated in the sense of it takes power to have freedom, right? It does for Luffy, right? Like Luffy wants to be able to make his own decisions. He wants to be able to do what he wants, and he feels like I need power in order to do that, which, you know, arguably is true. And that's the same reason why like Blackbeard is on the same path as well. But more than anything, Luffy believes in basically people being able to choose what they want to do, right?
Yes.
Whether that's Kobe, I want to be a Marine. Okay, go be the best Marine ever, right? Whether that's Sanji, where it's like, okay, like, go be like, I want you to be the best chef you can be. I don't, you know, obviously I appreciate you with your martial skills. You're a good fighter. But like, I want for you to be what you want to be, which is also to like be a great chef, right? So again, I'm not going to force you to use knives or weapons or anything like that. If you want to, you know, protect your hands, fight with your legs, cool, you know, be whatever you want to be. And obviously in this case for Sanji, it means being a great chef. Whatever that means, that's what I want for you. Like, I think that element of Luffy is specific to point out, because it isn't just freedom for freedom's sake. And I want to call this out specifically because Luffy doesn't really, and this is just the way the narrative goes, Luffy doesn't really go back to islands to make sure that they're still free. You get what I'm saying? Like,
that's not a part of
you get what I'm saying? Like, Luffy is there, and he's like, all of you guys have the freedom to choose now. I just took out the guy who was taking your freedom to choose, right? Now do with it what you will, right? And then he goes on his journey. He's not coming back. I mean, unless it's specifically something like, let's say in this case, Wano or Fishman Island, where they are specifically a protectorate of the Straw Hat crew. Other than that, and again, we haven't seen it happen, but other than that, Luffy doesn't move backwards. He's not going to go back and like protect your freedom. Like, he's there, you have it, you know, you can choose whatever you want to do. I'm out, right?
Yeah.
And that's just how it goes. Moogie, you got any thoughts, bro?
Yeah, no, I agree with what both of you are saying, so it's not too much different along that path. But yeah, Luffy in the whole story and in most manga and shonen, anything, he is definitely the most selfish character out of any main character. You know, and I'm pretty sure there's been times where people have been like, "Please help," and he's like, doesn't even like, look back and will like go the other way, you know, until it actually matters to him. I don't think that liberation is even on his mind at all. We don't really know what the One Piece is. So, like, I don't know what that end goal after what's going to happen. And by him just reaching there, he's just such an immovable force that, like, if someone's getting in his way, they end up being a baddie, and he ends up, by proxy, helping and liberating a lot of people. But I would say there was a moment where you were just talking about the theme of the story. Like, out of everything in the story, it's truly my belief that the One Piece world needs liberating. And it's like a theme of, like, the level of oppression is very high, and all the other conversations and main stories going on involve liberation or oppression in some kind of way. And Luffy's just this guy going through it, still having a blast with his friends, but also just like, I'm doing what I want to do. I'm getting it. I'm going to become the Pirate King. And we'll see what happens after that. But I do feel there's a lot of liberating at the forefront of most of these, like, arcs.
I mean, every arc, right, is like, you know, except for like some of the, I don't know, some of the more specific ones, like for instance Egghead or something like that.
Yeah.
When there is like a big bad, right, to your point, there is like a general kind of structure, right? For Luffy comes to an island, recognizes that the island is under some kind of dominion from a ruler, right, or leader or whoever that is treating the inhabitants unfairly, right, or at least some of the inhabitants unfairly, right. Luffy then basically normally through the idea of connecting with someone of basically kind of one of the have-nots. I mean, you see it in Wano with Tama specifically, where like she's starving and he really feels for the fact that the outside of the capital citizens of Wano struggle basically just to survive, right? They don't have clean water. It's like a drought because all of the means of agriculture or whatever are basically kind of focused on the capital, and then everything else in terms of natural resources are going to the production of smile fruit. I don't want to get stuck on that, but like, yes, to your point, there is a recurring kind of theme of Luffy goes to this island. I think it's just the way you set up a villain, honestly, as well. Yeah. And it's like a pretty straightforward plot. Who's the person on top? They're bad. Luffy's got to take them out, reset the system. It's kind of interesting. There's one thing that you mentioned, though, which is like, and I'm trying to think of this in my head, and I want to pose it to you guys. I want to say there have been instances of characters that Luffy has met and that he's dealt with that basically needed his help, right, in some way, but Luffy specifically denies them because he wants them to get it for themselves. Yeah. You get what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
Like, that's happened before. I can't think of a specific example. I mean,
I feel like Kobe was definitely one of those moments.
Like, I feel like Momo has that as well, even though obviously Wano becomes like a protector of the Straw Hat crew. But there have been like notable examples of like Luffy wants people to like, it's not just about like, I'm going to just give you freedom, right? It's also like, you need to be the kind of person to basically make your own choices in this world. And as a circumstance of that, gain your own freedom, right? But even like the freedom of mind of like, you need to break yourself out of whatever you think like you can't do.
I am not your savior.
Yes, exactly. I mean, it gets back to the title.
Oh, yeah.
Where it's like, again, like Luffy's main goal isn't, because if it was, right, like if Luffy was, he is the liberator of this world, he understands, he's seen, which by the way he has, he's seen the auction block, basically in Sabri Archipelago, which is pre-time skip. So Luffy understands the celestial dragons ain't shit. They are predatory, they're, obviously exploitative, they're corrupt and evil in a lot of ways in relation to how they treat other non-human races and including other human races in the world of One Piece. Is Luffy marching to Mary Joie like to basically topple that government on top of the world government? Of course he's not. Even in the case of attacking Enies Lobby and specifically declaring war on the world government, it ended when he saved Nico Robin. And then he went about his way. Where's the next place they go to? They go to Thriller Bark. Why? Because that's where the log post is pointing to.
Right. Like, and actually, if you think about it, there was nothing to liberate on Thriller Bark. To a degree. Like, the shadows of dead people, sure.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that because what happens is like, okay, so we get pointed to Thriller Bark because that's where the poneglyph, I keep saying poneglyph, where the log pose is pointing, right? Who do we meet basically in the Florian Triangle before we get to Thriller Bark? We meet Brook.
What?
Yep. We meet Brook in the Florian Triangle, and Brook basically is the connective force that is like, I had my shadow stolen, and here's my story. My entire crew died. I'm basically like
he was basically Kinemon to the Wano arc.
Yeah, I mean
which is why a lot of people might have thought Kinemon was going to be on the Straw Hats.
Oh my god, I'm glad
it was a similar onboarding experience there that we had with Brook and Kinemon in a way.
I mean, you see Oda use this kind of device a lot where like he will introduce. Okay, so it's like, well, why does the crew get invested or involved in? It's kind of twofold. So they meet Brook, but also like they found this barrel. I don't know if you guys remember. They found this barrel in the ocean in the Florian Triangle. They bring it up on the boat. They like open it up and then it sends off like this flare, and that effectively alerts Thriller Bark, like the giant kind of island ship, to like basically kind of move and then enclose them and capture them, right? But what ends up happening is like obviously they've met Brooke at this point when they realize, because Brooke is the person who tells me, he's like, oh, like you guys are trapped. Like they targeted you as soon as you opened that barrel. You guys should try to get out of here. But Luffy has already spoken to him, like wants to help him, right? And that is what sets up the, let's say, conflict between Luffy and Gecko Moria.
Greco Moria.
Yeah. So I don't like, so more or less the idea here is like the contention that, and don't get me wrong, I get it where it's like the end of the story, or let's just say post time skip, 100% since the introduction of Gear 5th, since the introduction of like the Nika prophecy, since the introduction of more information for like on Joy Boy. I mean, it is hammering those themes of liberation and freedom and liberation and freedom. Here's the caveat. When those things are brought up to Luffy, what does Luffy do? What does he say? And we have examples of this. The Elbaf pirates, when they storm Egghead Island and basically grab Luffy in the escape, they tell him like, oh my gosh, like, your white form or whatever, like it reminds us of Nika, and like Nika. Well, like they basically say it like again and again. And obviously you have like the interplay of Emmett and Bonnie basically also saying Nika and all this other kind of stuff, and or specifically Emmett saying Joy Boy. But it's like when that's brought up to Luffy, Luffy's like, I don't know who that is. Like I'm
like,
Luffy, right? Emmett calls Luffy Joy Boy. He's like, Joy Boy, like I'm so glad I got to hear the drums of liberation again. Like I'm really glad like to meet you and see you again. He's like, I don't know who that is. Fast forward, you have basically Elbaf, and the Giants are specifically telling Luffy, here is the prophecy of Nika. Nika is supposed to be, because by the way, Nika, the fables of Nika come from Elbaf. I think a lot of people, myself included, thought that maybe it came from like Shandy or something like that. No, it comes from Elbaf. But Luffy is told specifically the prophecy of Nika, and he's like, I don't care. Like, that has nothing to do with me, right? Yeah. And it's important to make that distinction because I think it's very easy to get into the Naruto problem, and I am going to use Naruto again, even though we got a lot of shit from like comparing One Piece to Kaguya or whatever.
You got shit for how you pronounced it.
Yeah, I don't care, whatever, right? The point being is like the Naruto problem at the end of the series was you had this ninja who had something special about them. You can call it the Kyuubi, you could call it like, Naruto had all of the reasons to have a chip on his shoulder, but he was just a special guy, and he was super adamant about proving everybody wrong, and that he was going to become the strongest, ninja in this world vis-a-vis the Hokage, right?
Believe it.
That was a great story, and the reason why so many people love Naruto, because it's like watching him just gradually get stronger without any of like the benefits of like, say, the Uchiha clans, obviously Sharingan, right?
Mm-hmm.
He didn't have any talent. He could barely even control the Kyuubi, which was like his only trump card, right? But then you get to the end of the series, and then you just introduce this like, oh, well, he's also got like Sage of Six Paths chakra, and everything starts to become a little bit easier, and then it becomes like he is the reincarnation of like this ancient, borderline.
It's like the primordial ninja.
Like what's the like Sage of Six Paths? I'm trying to remember the actual race of like the alien kind of like,
oh yeah,
you know what I mean? Whatever, right? Otsutsuki, whatever, right? Like but the point being is like, because they were like supposedly the children of like Kaguya or whatever, right? But the point being, right, is like you transformed a character who got it out the mud to being handed a silver spoon because he was destined to be this like great ninja because of this, crazy lineage and all this other kind of stuff, and it kind of messed up that narrative, right? Because then you introduce the chosen one.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's hard for any story to really avoid that trope, like it's a meaningful distinction in a lot of storylines that really make people gravitate to them, right? Like you even have that with like Neo in the Matrix, and there's just so many examples of that chosen one aspect. But I think that what they attempt to do is try to say, oh, like the hardships that you were brought up with were due to how special you are, right? Like You were just kind of built to endure struggles that the average person wouldn't have been able to endure, right? And this is your reward for having endured all of that, is the manifestation of that power that was always yours and something you've had from the beginning. And so that's not a particular story trope that I'm mad at because it's just like it's the hero's journey. So we're gonna see it come back around time and time again, and I'm not mad that we're seeing it with Luffy now, with Gear 5 and
Well,
all of that. But I
I don't think we're
absolutely
seeing it with
love.
Luffy now.
Interesting. So all I was gonna say is that I absolutely love how Luffy um, refutes all of that.
Yes.
Right? Like he's like,
Yes.
I'm not Joy Boy, I'm Luffy. What? Nika? Nah, I'm Luffy. Like, forget whatever anybody else is talking about to him. He's like, I am who I am. Y'all can keep whatever opinion you have about me to yourself. It don't make me no never mind. I'm gonna keep on with this journey and what I have to do. So yeah, that's how I feel about him. Like it does aid to the point of him not really caring about being a liberator, though. That's another point for him just being a cold G that he make plays, he moves, gets things done. He got motion
Yeah.
towards his personal endeavors, and everything else is happenstance.
Moogie, what are your thoughts?
I don't have much more to add on that. I just think of Luffy. Yeah, Luffy to me, he's clear cut from the beginning. He's just like, he's got his mind on something. He's super selfish about it. He's kind of turned into more of like a entity type to me, which is, I don't know when it really changed, obviously with Gear 5th, but he's less like,
You mean like a
instinct-
vessel?
yeah, like a vessel, or like, I don't know, he feels otherworldly now. Like he's like a trickster god or something, how he talks and everything. It's almost like everyone else is approaching things like logically, and he's just like, yes, I'm doing this, and
That's
he's
a good
always
good
like,
impersonation.
he's becoming this like
Persnickety individual.
just like a force of
Yeah.
nature that like can't be controlled or doing anything. But yeah, I'm in total agreement with both of you. Like he's freedom, but I do think like the rest of the world is like, everything is really about when things are gonna get liberated and stuff. But
Yeah.
I'll
The
let
point you
get
brought
back
up-
to it.
The point you brought up about his otherworldliness at this stage is something that I definitely see and acknowledge, and I think that obviously a portion of that was very intentional, but something that was very amazing for us as the viewers is that we got to see it in such a natural progression, and we've just been following along so closely with Luffy that it was kind of hard to really understand the weight of his presence in the world until we get those like flashbacks and those announcements that Killer Cam hates,
Yeah.
Like it's
I really
only
don't
in
like
those
those.
moments like that. Those are the moments that coalesce the truth of Luffy's presence in the world for us as readers and viewers, right? Like it really makes things make more sense where it's just like, oh wow, like his presence here made all of this other thing, like all of these other things fell in line because he was here, right? And then the way that movements have started happening where it's like, oh, we can't go there, that's now Straw Hat's territory. That's insane.
You
Go
were
ahead.
about to talk, Cam, but like, you did mention that like people are like, oh, Luffy's Joy Boy, Luffy's Nika, he's Nika and all this stuff, and usually how prophecies go, there's an idea that like once you know the prophecy or once you know the future, there's like ways that it might change, like it
Yeah.
might change the future because you know the future. And like the way that there's like prophecy and a lot of just like legend behind Nika Joy Boy, and now Luffy is expected to do a lot of these things, the fact that he denies it so much that it's almost not even registering in his brain, like once they're like, you are somebody, he doesn't like the thought of that, in one ear out the other, he doesn't even hear what they're saying. It almost gives me like foresight to see that like that means those prophecies are going to come true, because he is just absolutely that prophecy and those beings that everyone is revering, that like nothing that you say is swaying him from that path. You know,
Right.
like a soothsayer.
'Cause it-
Someone's giving you like your
Yeah.
fortune and stuff like that. It could change your path.
Go
Yeah, I
ahead,
mean,
Ken.
I think it's interesting because we do still have the future that supposedly is resolute and basically unchangeable from Shirley in Fishman Island, who basically says this guy is going to destroy Fishman Island, right? I think that's going to happen, just because I don't think Oda would go through the pains of she's always right and then give us examples where it's like that vase is going to drop or something like that. I forget exactly what it was, but I think what for me it's like the problem for me is like the connection of Nika and Joy Boy specifically with the Gomu Gomu no Mi. Like Nika specifically, right? Whether they existed or not, right? We don't know. Had rubber fruit powers. I mean, that's like basically like what the fables say, right? Joy Boy was the previous owner, and maybe there was somebody in between, but we know that he was an owner, right, of the Gomu Gomu no Mi. And I think the problem with that and the reason why it kind of takes away, particularly with the introduction of Gear 5th, takes away from Luffy is because now it's like Luffy took this fruit that like a lot of people didn't even want. Like if you go back and look at the original series, like the original like arcs, right? When basically the series is introducing the fruit and people are reacting to it, it's like, oh, it's such a stupid fruit. It's like doesn't do anything good, whatever, right? Luffy being able to make that fruit specifically so powerful and so imaginative and so creative and interesting, particularly dealing with enemies with much better fruits and much more dangerous fruits. It really led itself into this idea that Luffy is special. And I don't mean special in the sense of destined to be special, that, it's prophesized that he's special. He is special because, one, his mindset, but two, like just the kind of person he is. He's able to leverage so much out of like a very basic fruit because he's just that guy, right? He's destined to become the Pirate King. When you add in all of these other elements of like, no, actually, it's like a super strong fruit, and it's been a super strong fruit, and it's been the fruit of this, maybe fictional god. And also, it was the fruit of, this incredible, first pirate, by the way, like the first pirate to ever be in the world, right? To go head to head with, I guess, the previous, 20 aligned kingdoms. He still lost, but like, it's just this like literal godlike kind of fighter. We were like still feeling his hockey in today's times. Like, I think that does kind of take away from Luffy. Like, because I know a lot of people thought like, oh man, what was the fruit that Roger had? Was it the Gomu Gomu no Mi? And then obviously we find out that Roger didn't have a fruit. But I just kind of wish that like there, to some degree, there wasn't that direct connection that like these figures that are being compared to Luffy also had the same powers. You know what I mean? I mean, it is what it is. Like, obviously, Oda's trying to set it up in that way, but I think, I think the idea, right, and again, just kind of getting back full circle to like the subject at hand, right? Luffy is not the savior of the world of One Piece, or at least not explicitly. That's not what he's trying to do, right? At least in this point in the story,
Right.
He's trying to achieve his dream vis-a-vis by becoming the Pirate King. I think the reason why a lot of people get confused is because all of these kind of like Luffy's the chosen one. He just doesn't know it yet. He needs to accept his destiny. His destiny is to liberate the world. Kuma's kind of pushing this out. The Elbaf warriors are kind of pushing this out. Everybody who knows the fable of Nika believes, specifically because he's got white hair, he looks just like him, whatever, and he has the fruit, right? That Luffy is destined to be this like great liberator. I do like the fact that Oda is actively writing Luffy to reject that. He's like, I don't know who that is. I don't really care. I'm just trying to do what I'm trying to do. And the only reason I'm in Elbaf right now is because, one, there might be a road poneglyph here, and I'm trying to find out so that I can get to Laftel so that I can find the One Piece. Or two, because I heard that Shanks was around here, might have been here recently, and I'd like to see Shanks. That's it. That's the reason why they're in Elbaf. So I think what kind of confuses the subject is this chosen one, specifically through Gear Fifth, specifically through the reveal that the Gomu Gomu no Mi is actually the Hito Hito no Mi model Nika, right? And it lends itself, Mugi, to your point, of this like post time skip emphasis on the world is really a corrupt and dangerous place, and nobody really kind of understands, right? Unless you're on like the lower ends of societies, particularly through these kingdoms that have like corrupt leaders. They're enslaving their people. I mean, we can get into like Kuma a little bit, and we'll maybe say that for another video. But I think Kuma represents the kind of like epitome of like the worst treatment of humans, or not even just humans, but treatment of anybody in the world of One Piece by virtue of direct contact with the world government and the Celestial Dragons, and just seeing like, and also the Gods Knights, the full scope of their kind of inhumanity, right? That most of the world is oblivious to.
That's a very good point, because there's a lot of psychological trauma involved in the knowingness that those who directly govern you are also the ones that are directly involved in your, gentrification, basic. Not gentrification. I was going to say the one word that I probably shouldn't say on camera because it's weighted, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
The other G word where a lot of people don't make it.
Yeah.
That's the kind of situation that's an existential dread that Kuma has to live with. That's all I'll say. And so, I agree with your point that that's a major aspect of the potency of why people need to be liberated in the story of One Piece. When you said that it brings up contrast in the way that people are talking about the conversation, and you kind of mentioned it as a point of confusion for people, I just think that it's one of layers, right? And I just think that people are acknowledging the varying layers of how freedom is intertwined within this story of One Piece. And I think that those who are willing to accept the nuance understand that, okay, Luffy is not just a liberator, right? Like, he doesn't even consider himself a liberator, but we get the benefit of his liberation, right? We get the benefit of being liberated by him. And again, triple down on your point, I agree about him refuting all of the prophecies is what makes it so rewarding. Like, as far as the whole prophecy storyline thing is concerned, it's only really in those that the ones who are able to like really like sit with themselves and be like, nah, that's not who I am. Like, I am who I am, right? And whatever lineage or baggage I got, like, y'all are going to meet me where I'm at, and I'm going to make it my own, right? I think, obviously, My Hero Academia does a somewhat of a good job of that, right? Of articulating very directly, like, inherited will and how much influence that has over a single individual's right to do what they feel called to do within their journey, right? And so I think with Luffy, he's going to continue to do that. That's why we're going to get the best of what we got out of Luffy. The people are going to continue to be liberated, but it's fair to say that the story isn't just about liberation, and it's not just about the freedom. It's a byproduct of the real journey and the real dream that we have still yet to really get clarity on.
One thing to add too is like, again, with this like prophecy, destiny, all this other kind of stuff, I think would also kind of hurt if you don't like that kind of storytelling, was the fact that when the Gorosei are talking about the Hito Hito no Mi, they specifically mention that the Gomu Gomu no Mi, right, or Hito Hito no Mi in this case, model Nika, has a mind of its own, right? Mm-hmm. That it is evaded capture, that it specifically chose Luffy, right? Mm-hmm. Like, again, it just kind of lends itself to like, and I like that Oda is writing Luffy to kind of actively push against that.
Yeah.
But it does feel like, and I understand why viewers and readers feel this, that like it's kind of a destiny that's being pressed upon Luffy that he doesn't necessarily ascribe to. Because like I feel that as a reader, obviously, like everybody who talks to Luffy and that sees his Gear Fifth form, they're telling him that he's Nika. They're telling him that like, Nika is prophesized to do all these things, and Luffy is still undeterred in the sense of, that's nice, but I want to become the Pirate King. I want to achieve my dream. But yeah, I do think that like that specific those specific elements where it's like the fruit shows him. The fruit was previously owned by Joy Boy. The fruit was, like a representative of like an actual real god or whatever. I think those kind of again lend itself to, for lack of a better word, a drumbeat of Luffy is a liberator. Luffy is destined to do these things, because Luffy is Nika and blah, 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 blah. It just goes on and on and on. But I do think it's important, like you mentioned, that Luffy still has agency. Oda still gives Luffy agency. Luffy, what he chooses to do in terms of where he goes, in terms of how he prioritizes his next steps, they are almost always, and again, I say almost just because the only exception of that is really in this case, let's say
Neo.
Ace, right? Like going back for Ace. Outside of that, and maybe you can make the argument like going to save Nico Robin. I mean, they were already on Water 7 specifically to find a shipwright and then find a new ship, right? And then, ultimately Robin kind of defects and then they realize that, it was, forced, right? It wasn't a choice. So they go to save her and that's why they're there. But the whole thing is like, they choose the islands that they're going to because those are in the progressive steps on the Grand Line. They're in the New World, like, because that is the second half of the Grand Line, and that's where you have to go. The reason why they targeted Kaido, specifically in collaboration with Law and Kid, was because basically they needed the road poneglyphs that they have, right? And Law makes it a point of, we have to take these guys down if we want to, if you want to get closer to becoming the Pirate King, like these are the people that are standing in your way. And Luffy like specifically makes it a point that that he wants to take down the Yonko and basically kind of flush out that previous generation. So yeah, anyways, not to belabor the point, let's just get final thoughts. Mugi, let's start with you.
Final thoughts. Yeah, I mean, we touched on a lot of it. I don't know how many people are talking about Luffy is now a liberator, but like, and I don't know how much I agree with. Like, I know that the fruit found him, or like that it chooses. It has it's sentient in a way, or like that it. I think there's some gray there. Like it's not black and white how it was written. Like how it moved around and got to Luffy. And how it's been avoiding the government. I think there's something else going on there. But yeah, I think it's more Luffy who he is. It like made it so he could have that fruit. But I don't think, because it would change a lot for me if the fruit just actually literally found him and made him this. Like, I don't like that. I think you said before you don't really like that because that's
I think they
chosen one type of thing, and it's just
I think they
everything
meant it
handed to you.
I think it's like the idea is basically the fruit has kind of the ability to affect probability, right?
Yeah.
So like,
yes,
it was able to basically fall out of the world government's grasp, and then Shanks was able to find it, and then Shanks had it, and then Shanks brought it to Luffy, and then Luffy happened to eat it. You know what I mean? Like, I think it's all
but the fruit wasn't like rolling itself
No, it's not
down
literally
a hill
rolling,
and
yeah.
like jumping into
No,
a basket.
But I think it
on
has an
its own.
ability to affect probability
And
around it, and like the probability of moving it closer to. Maybe it wasn't looking for Luffy, right? Maybe it was just
I mean, honestly, it's
getting
the
away from the
principle of our
world
reality.
government, right? But like,
Yeah.
the idea that a fruit, particularly because it's a Zoan, has the mind of its own, and like they said that this one's like particularly tricky, and like obviously Who's Who talks about like, man, like basically that getting out of the world government or Navy's hands or whatever, like that affected me personally, like that really messed a lot of things up.
Yeah.
I thought it was kind of interesting.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people, not a lot, maybe someone has had it in between, and maybe it was one of those chance situations, but that person wasn't like a ridiculous
They didn't
being
really awaken it.
like Luffy.
I mean, we don't know if anybody else has had
doing
it.
things.
Like,
no, we don't.
I
I'm
get
just
you.
Thinking,
Yeah.
It's been a long time. It's been in people's possession. You know, and they know about it. That the reason they probably didn't have it logged as the Hito no Mi was to keep it kind of hidden, and it lived as a rubber fruit for a while. I don't know. This is all headcanon, but like who Luffy is and like how he's just such an crazy, like freakish type of person. Like even just like how he's just like never really upset. He's just gallivanting around, destroying things.
Like Luffy's
like
spirit.
Luffy's spirit, yeah, it has a lot to do with why he had that fruit. But yeah,
Sure.
for the main conversation, Luffy has specifically like ditched things and said he doesn't care about being a hero. Like he is just on his way to become the Pirate King, and it's a very powerful force. He's like a juggernaut heading that way, and all people are trying to stop him, which leads to the One Piece probably having a lot to do with the liberation that the government's trying to avoid, etc. But yeah, that's what I got.
Mr. Waterfree, go ahead.
Yeah, I feel that. I was going to say that I like the idea of the fruit affecting probability of destiny. I think that that is more in line with how I was originally interpreting it as well. I think that Luffy's spirit is a part of the ingredients that catalyze the fruit, right? To be what it is within him, right? So, like, I just think that
Yeah.
Luffy's spirit, to Mike's point, is a part of the equation as to why he is the chosen one, right? It's not just like if anybody were to have picked up that fruit, they probably would have just got the rubber and been on their way.
Yeah.
We would have never known about them in that light, and probably the government wouldn't be bent out of shape about it, right? Like they were cautious, they were concerned once Gear 5 was revealed. You know what I'm saying? Like it was only once we really started to understand that the fruit was something else entirely did we really unpack the severity of the situation around the fruit, right? And so that means for the most part of the story, we never get to see anybody tripping about him having the gum fruit. And I think that's probably, to Mike's point, how it might have been before. I agree. It's probably headcanon that we don't know, that there might have been another user in between there, but
Yeah, and I don't think we need to
it feels
know.
interesting.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I don't think Oda needs to create another character. Be like, oh, this was actually his mom was the
Yeah.
person who had it or whatever. But yeah, I guess, and not to get too into like speculation and theory, but I will just say thematically, what is the real focus of Elbaf so far, right? Yes, the intent of going there was we're gonna look for the road poneglyph, right? We're gonna get that last thing, check it off, and then we're gonna go to Laftel, right? We need to satisfy like this, promise or whatever that Oda, not really necessarily made, but like kind of hinted that we would eventually visit Elbaf, right? And I think it's kind of a little
But
bit
yeah,
of fan
they're
service.
also excited. They want.
Yeah,
to
yeah,
have
I mean,
that
for sure.
adventure.
Specifically like Usopp and Luffy, like
Yeah.
they've been excited about it for a while. But I guess like thematically, like what is what does the story need out of this, right? I would argue that the story so far, just because Emu has gotten directly involved, is to, and also because the Elbaf warriors, like basically their fables or whatever, are directly involved with Nika. And it's the reason why they crashed into Egghead to like pull Luffy and help them like escape. I do think that like this is going to be the arc that really kind of hammers in Luffy, Nika, Liberator, Emu, Dominator, Control, Evil, whatever, right? Mm-hmm. I think that is going to be the dichotomy specifically within this arc. I don't know if it's necessarily going to finish. I don't know if Emu is going to get defeated. I doubt it. But I do think that Luffy in this arc, even though he knows the Nika prophecy, obviously he just is doing his own thing. I think that what we're doing right now is we're setting up this confrontation of like Luffy pivoting after he achieves effectively, let's say he gets the One Piece, right? Maybe he doesn't achieve his dream yet. But at some point he is going to have to pivot and he's going to have to go and maybe it's, not necessarily liberate Mary Joie. I don't even think he's going to go there at this point just because, it's on fire, right? And we don't even know if that's going to be the final battleground. But I do think this arc is supposed to be setting up a final confrontation, right? Or at least a major confrontation as Luffy being this kind of liberator, like this juxtaposition of Luffy, more or less kind of basically
Having to be the
kind
savior of the world.
deposing of the current let's say power structure, right, of the world, right? I'd love to see that like take place on somewhere else other than Mary Joie. Maybe we'll go there. I think particularly with like the giant hat. I just feel like that's gonna have to come into play, and maybe it's gonna be there, not necessarily taken out. Who knows? But I do think this arc is going to really hammer, obviously Loki as well, believing that he's Nika. Nika versus basically, in this case, Emu. Like, just the evils of the world. So, I mean, I think you just kind of have to if you're going to set up, again, that pivot of Luffy is going to continue on his journey to, like, become the Pirate King, but what happens after that? So, I mean, we'll have to wait and see what happens. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, like I said, if you're watching this and you're like, I don't care what you guys said, the whole thing is about freedom, the whole thing is about liberation. That's fine. Make an argument in the comments. I mean, we've tried to kind of like play around with the idea of Luffy still has agency. He believes really in kind of choice, right, as like first and foremost, not necessarily freedom. And you can maybe make the argument that those are similar, but I just don't think, and I'm not really convinced that Luffy is trying to be the liberator, the savior of the world of One Piece. At least not first and foremost. I think it's a consequence, but it's a consequence as a result of his journey, his adventure, which, to be honest, like the pre-time skip was really kind of about basically adventure. It's about pursuing one's dreams, having will and ambition to like do what it is that you want to do within the world. And then basically expressing that by following through and taking action. So not to belabor the point, this was a fun one. We saved 10 minutes. Normally these are about an hour, so we're doing good.
Before the call started, we said 30 to 45.
Yeah. It's funny because I saw it at like 25 and I was like, maybe this is going to be a short one. And then we just kind of kept going. Anyways, we'll just wrap things up. It's your boy Killy Clam. It's your boy Killy Clam. Thanks for being with us. This is Anime Parlay. We love talking about this stuff. We'll have some really cool videos to come up next. And I'll let the rest of the crew do their thing.
Peace and blessings, y'all. Wild and Free out. I hit, let's see how many miles I hit. I done hit, drum roll, 1.37 miles. That's it.
Nice.
Very good.
Very nice.
Yo, it's Spooky Mike. I'm out. Thanks for the talk.
Okay. All right. Until next time, guys.
Peace.
Peace.